The sky over New Shanghai burned an unnatural orange-red, the color of dying embers. Dr. Lena Oren stood at the observation deck of the Chronos complex, watching as another energy rationing riot broke out in the lower sectors. The year 2235 was not kind to Earth, nor to the 12 billion souls struggling to survive on its depleted surface. "Beautiful sunset," remarked a deep voice behind her. Lena didn't turn. "That's not sunset, Max. That's atmospheric degradation from the latest resource war in Southeast Asia." Lieutenant Colonel Max Reyes stepped up beside her, his military uniform crisp despite the oppressive heat. The climate control systems had been running at minimum capacity for months now. "The Council is ready for your presentation," he said, eyes fixed on the horizon where plumes of smoke rose from the city. Lena nodded, gathering her notes on the tablet. The culmination of 15 years of work, of theoretical impossibilities made possible, of hopes and fears. Today, she would either save humanity or be laughed out of the scientific community forever. "The temporal extraction theory," she muttered. "I still can't believe they approved the prototype." Max's face remained impassive. "Desperate times, Dr. Oren. The human alliance is running out of options." The council chamber hummed with anxious energy as 12 figures in formal attire sat around a circular table. The room, buried deep beneath the Earth's surface, was one of the few that still maintained full environmental controls, a privilege reserved for those who governed what remained of human civilization. "Dr. Oren," began Counselor Zhang, the eldest member, "we understand your team has achieved a breakthrough." Lena activated the holographic display at the center of the table, showing a three-dimensional model of what appeared to be an ornate pocket watch, except its face displayed impossible mathematical equations instead of numbers. "The temporal regulator," she announced. "After 15 years of research, we've confirmed that time isn't simply linear. It's a resource that pools and concentrates around certain historical events." She expanded the display to show timelines branching and reconnecting. "Some moments in history are pivotal, what we call load-bearing events. Others are surprisingly expendable." She paused, letting the implications sink in. "My team has developed technology that can extract temporal energy from these non-essential historical moments without disrupting the primary timeline." Counselor Patel leaned forward. "You're proposing we steal time from the past?" "Not steal," Lena corrected. "Harvest excess temporal energy. Every historical event generates more time than is actually needed to maintain causality. We can extract this surplus without causing damage. And convert it to usable energy," finished Max, stepping forward. "Enough to power our cities, our terraforming projects, our survival." The room fell silent as the implications set in. "How soon can you deploy?" asked Counselor Zhang. "We've assembled a team," Lena replied. "The Chronos hunters, scientists, temporal navigators, and security personnel led by myself and Lieutenant Colonel Reyes. We're ready for our first jump to 1978 Tokyo, a temporal sweet spot with minimal historical ripple effects." Hours later, in the temporal hub, a satellite station orbiting Earth, Lena met with her team. Dr. Kato Nakamura, the programming genius who had coded the temporal regulator's interface, was running final diagnostics. Mira O'Connell, a former hacker turned temporal security expert, checked her equipment with practiced efficiency. Siri Patel, the team's temporal physician and psychological anchor, prepared medical kits designed to treat time displacement sickness. "First jump jitters?" Kaito asked, noticing Lena's trembling hands. "Theory is one thing," she admitted, "but actually piercing the veil between now and then?" "We've run the simulations 1,000 times," he reassured her. "The timeline can handle small extractions." Max entered the preparation chamber, now dressed in period-appropriate civilian clothes for 1978. "Team briefing in 5 minutes. Remember, this is a simple in-and-out operation. We locate the temporal surplus around the Tokyo International Film Festival, extract it, and return. No interactions, no traces. Lena nodded, but couldn't shake a growing unease. Something about the Council's eagerness bothered her. Their resources had been allocated too quickly, the approval too easy. The team gathered around the temporal bridge, a circular platform surrounded by quantum stabilizers. Each member wore a wristwatch-like device connected to the central temporal regulator. "Synchronize chrono anchors," Lena instructed. 5 watches beeped in unison. "Remember," she continued, "we're observing only. The slightest interaction could create a temporal aberration." Mira grinned. "So, no betting on horse races or stock markets?" "This isn't a joke," Max snapped. "Temporal discipline is non-negotiable." The platform hummed to life, a blue-white light emanating from beneath their feet. "Temporal coordinates locked," announced Kaito. "Tokyo, October 8th, 1978, 15:30 local time." Lena took a deep breath. "Initiate jump sequence." The world dissolved into brilliant blue light. Pain shot through Lena's body as reality twisted and compressed around her. Then, suddenly, noise and sensation flooded back. The smell of cigarette smoke, the sound of traffic, humid air against her skin. She opened her eyes to an alleyway in Tokyo, 1978. The team materialized beside her, each grimacing through the disorientation of time travel. "Status check," she managed through gritted teeth. One by one, they confirmed their arrival, all except... "Kaito's anchor is unstable," Mira reported, checking her device. "His signal's fluctuating." Kaito himself seemed fine, but his chrono anchor flashed with erratic patterns. "Must be calibration error," he suggested. "The regulator is still syncing with local temporal fields." "We should abort," Lena said immediately. "Protocol is clear. Any equipment malfunction means immediate recall." Max shook his head. "We don't have enough energy for another jump without harvesting first. We complete the mission, then return." Before Lena could protest further, a wave of nausea hit her, but not physical sickness. This was different, a wrongness that permeated reality itself. She staggered against a wall. "Something's happening," she gasped. "The temporal field is shifting." The sky above Tokyo momentarily flickered, like a television losing signal. Pedestrians continued walking, oblivious to the cosmic glitch. "Kaito's anchor is creating feedback in the timeline," Lena realized with horror. "We've triggered an aberration." The temporal regulator at Max's belt began to pulse with warning lights. "Temporal ripple detected," he confirmed, "spreading outward through the continuum. If it reaches critical historical events," Siri began. "It could erase our timeline completely," Lena finished. Max made a decision. "New mission parameters. We need to stabilize the aberration before extraction. Kaito, can you recalibrate the regulator to seal the temporal leak?" The programmer examined the device. "Maybe, but I need time and a secure location." "The film festival starts in 30 minutes, Mira noted. "Perfect cover. We'll blend with the crowds while Kaito works." They moved through Tokyo streets, each step a surreal experience for Lena. These people, this world, everything vibrant and alive, unaware of the resource wars and climate collapse that awaited them. Guilt gnawed at her. Was it right to siphon energy from their time to fuel her own? At the festival entrance, another ripple shook the timeline. This time, several pedestrians paused, looking confused, as if momentarily sensing something amiss. "The aberration is growing stronger," Lena whispered. "We're affecting conscious perception now." They found a quiet corner in a nearby cafe. Kaito opened the temporal regulator, exposing its intricate quantum circuitry. "The problem is fundamental," he explained, after several minutes of examination. "The regulator wasn't designed to harvest without creating micro-tears in the timeline. Each extraction point becomes a wound that doesn't heal properly." "That's impossible," Lena insisted. "My equations accounted for temporal resilience. The timeline should self-repair." "Theory versus practice," Dr. Oren, Max said grimly. We're causing damage simply by being here. A chill ran through Lena. The Council. They must have known. The simulations would have shown this. Maybe they thought the risk worth taking, Siri suggested. Or maybe, Max said carefully. Harvesting time without consequences was never the real mission. Before Lena could question him further. A man in a black suit entered the cafe, scanning the room with deliberate attention. Nothing about his appearance was extraordinary. Yet Lena felt a prickle of danger. Temporal agent, Mira whispered. Every era has them. People instinctively drawn to timeline disruptions. Their subconscious senses the wrongness. We need to move, Max ordered. Now! They slipped out through the kitchen just as two more agents entered the front. Outside. The sky flickered again, longer this time. The aberration is accelerating, Kaito warned. If I can't stabilize the regulator soon, we'll lose our connection to 2235 completely. They found temporary shelter in an abandoned warehouse near the docks. As night fell over Tokyo, Kaito worked feverishly on the regulator while Lena recalculated her temporal equations. It doesn't make sense, she muttered. The math was perfect. Perhaps too perfect, Max suggested, keeping watch at the window. Have you considered that the Council might have modified your equations? Lena looked up sharply. Why would they sabotage their own mission? Because creating controlled aberrations might be exactly what they want, he replied. Destabilize certain historical periods. Redirect the timeline toward outcomes that favor the Alliance's power structure. That's insane, Lena protested. Manipulating history could erase our own existence. Or ensure it, Max countered. The right changes at the right moments could guarantee the Alliance maintains control of Earth's remaining resources indefinitely. Siri, who had been monitoring temporal radiation levels, interrupted. We have a bigger problem. The aberration is expanding exponentially. At this rate, it will reach 1945 within hours. Hiroshima, Lena whispered. A load-bearing event. If the aberration disrupts the atomic bombing, everything changes, Kaito finished. The entire post-war world order, technological development, geopolitical boundaries, all altered. We need to jump to 1945, Lena decided. Contain the aberration at its destination before it arrives. Max shook his head. The regulator doesn't have enough power for a jump that far back. It would, Mira said quietly. If we harvested time here first, as originally planned. The moral dilemma hung heavy in the air. Steal time from 1978 to save 1945, potentially worsening the aberration in the process. There's another option, Kaito said hesitantly. We could use the regulator to create a temporal loop, essentially folding 1978 back on itself to generate energy. Would that work? Lena asked. In theory, but we'd be trapped in the loop until it collapses, with no guarantee we could escape. Before they could decide, the warehouse door burst open. 3 temporal agents stood in the entrance, their expressions unnaturally blank. Time thieves, the lead agent stated flatly. You will cease operations and surrender your technology. Max moved with military precision, drawing a small device that emitted a pulse of blue energy. The agent stumbled, momentarily disoriented. Temporal scrambler, he explained. Disrupts their connection to the timeline. We have minutes at most. A quick decision was needed. Do it, Lena told Kaito. Create the loop, harvest the energy. We'll deal with escaping later. As Kaito activated the sequence, Tokyo began to shimmer around them. The same 6 minutes repeated, a distant clock tower chiming, a ship's horn blaring, footsteps approaching the warehouse, then resetting. It's working, Kaito confirmed, as the regulator's energy reserves filled. But the loop is accelerating the aberration. We've got maybe 3 cycles before it collapses completely. On the 3rd repetition, as the clock tower chimed again, Lena shouted, Now! The world dissolved once more into blue light. The journey to 1945 was far more violent than their first jump. Lena felt as though her body was being torn apart and reassembled incorrectly. When reality stabilized, they found themselves on a military base under the cover of night. In the distance, the city of Hiroshima slept peacefully, unaware of its imminent devastation. August 5, 1945, Siri confirmed, checking her instruments. Approximately 8 hours before the Enola Gay takes off. The aberration manifested here as visible distortions in the air, like heat waves on a summer road. Reality itself seemed thin, fragile. The temporal tear is worse than I thought, Lena observed. It's not just affecting perception, it's affecting physical laws. As if to confirm her assessment, a nearby jeep briefly flickered out of existence, then reappeared with slight differences, different coloring, different insignia. Timeline fluctuation, Kaito explained. Multiple potential realities trying to assert themselves simultaneously. Max surveyed the military base. We need access to the bomber. If the aberration affects the atomic payload, we're not here to ensure the bombing happens, Lena said firmly. We're here to stabilize the timeline, whatever form that takes. And if stabilizing means ensuring the bomb drops, Max challenged. The moral weight of their position struck Lena fully. They stood hours away from one of history's most devastating moments, with the power to potentially prevent it. Yet doing so might unravel the future entirely. First, we contain the aberration, she decided. Then we can debate ethics. Kaito set to work modifying the temporal regulator again. I can create a containment field around the tear, but it will drain our remaining power. We'll have no way back to 2235. One problem at a time, Lena replied. As they worked, more temporal agents appeared, different from those in 1978. These wore military uniforms from various decades, some not yet designed in 1945. Time police, Mira whispered. Protectors from different eras converging on the disturbance. Max readied his scrambler, but Lena stopped him. No. If they're here to fix the timeline, we should cooperate. She stepped forward, hands raised. We're not the enemy. We're trying to repair a temporal aberration. The lead agent, wearing a uniform from approximately 2100, assessed her coldly. You're the source of the aberration. Your presence here violates temporal accord regulations that don't even exist yet. We didn't know, Lena explained rapidly. Our technology was flawed. We're trying to contain the damage. The agent hesitated, then nodded toward Kaito and the regulator. That device, it's causing timeline fragmentation across 3 centuries. We're modifying it to create a containment field, Kaito explained. After a tense moment, the agent nodded. We'll secure the perimeter. You have 20 minutes before this area undergoes forced temporal reconciliation. As the agents dispersed, Max pulled Lena aside. You trust them? They could be alliance plants from our future. We don't have a choice, she replied. And their presence confirms something important. There is a future. Whatever happens here doesn't erase our timeline completely. Working feverishly, Kaito completed the modifications. The regulator now pulsed with steady blue light, drawing the visual distortions toward it, like a magnet collecting iron filings. It's working, he confirmed. The aberration is being contained, but a massive temporal shockwave knocked them all to the ground. When Lena looked up, she saw something impossible. Multiple versions of Hiroshima overlapping in the distance. One peaceful, one in flames, one rebuilt in futuristic style. Timeline collapse, gasped Kaito. The aberration is too strong for the containment field. The temporal agent returned, now accompanied by others from even further futures, their uniforms and equipment increasingly advanced. You've failed, the agent stated. We're initiating Protocol Omega, a complete temporal reset of this region. That would erase thousands of people from existence, Lena protested. Versus millions throughout time if the aberration spreads, the agent countered. The decision is made. It was then that Max made his move. With startling speed, he grabbed the temporal regulator from Kaido, simultaneously drawing a weapon none of them had seen before. "Lieutenant Colonel?" Lena asked, bewildered. "This was always the mission." "Dr. Oren," he said calmly. "The Council doesn't want to save the timeline. They want to reset it. Strategic historical modifications to ensure Alliance dominance." He backed away, regulator in hand. "I have new orders. The Hiroshima event will be modified, creating a butterfly effect that ultimately prevents the resource wars. The Alliance will control all temporal technology, all energy production." "You can't!" Lena lunged forward, but Max activated a personal temporal shield, creating a bubble of slowed time around himself. "I respected your brilliance, Dr. Oren," he said, his voice distorted through the field. "But you're too idealistic. History is a resource to be exploited, just like everything else." The temporal agents fired advanced weapons at Max's shield, but their energy dispersed harmlessly against it. With a final look at his former team, Max activated the regulator and vanished. "Where did he go?" demanded the lead agent. Lena's mind raced through calculations. The temporal bridge, the physical connection point between past and future. It's the only place where he can implement widespread changes to the timeline. "Where is this bridge?" the agent pressed. "It doesn't exist in normal space-time," Lena explained. "It's a conceptual structure that manifests at points of temporal significance." Kaido's eyes widened. "The Enola Gay. It's this time period's strongest connection point to future events." The agents conferred briefly. Then the leader turned back to Lena. "We'll handle the aberration containment. Your team needs to stop your commander before he rewrites history." They raced toward the airfield, Mira using her hacking skills to bypass security systems of the era. The massive bomber sat silently in the pre-dawn darkness. But as they approached, Lena saw something extraordinary. A shimmering blue doorway hovering above the aircraft, seemingly leading nowhere. "The bridge," she whispered. "Max forced it open." Without equipment, they had no way to follow him into the temporal dimension. Then Siri pointed to the chrono anchors on their wrists. "These are still synchronized to the regulator. They might provide enough connection to access the bridge." "It's likely one way," Kaido warned. "Without the regulator to bring us back?" Lena nodded grimly. "We'll be stranded in temporal space, but if Max succeeds, we won't have a timeline to return to anyway." Together, they adjusted their anchors to maximum power and stepped toward the shimmering doorway. The world around them stretched and distorted, then disappeared entirely. The temporal bridge defied description, a crystalline pathway suspended in void, with fractal branches extending outward to different moments in time. History itself was visible here, not as events, but as interconnected energy patterns. And at the center of the bridge stood Max. The regulator now expanded into a complex console of light and mathematics. "Beautiful, isn't it?" he called, as they approached cautiously. "Pure time, before it's packaged into moments and experiences. This is what the Alliance wants to control. You can't reshape history without consequences." "Max," Lena pleaded. "The timeline is too complex for controlled manipulation." "The Council's scientists disagree," he replied, manipulating the console. "Their models show we can create precise changes with predictable outcomes. A bombing that ends differently, leading to altered power structures, different resource allocation patterns." "And the billions of lives you'll change? The people who will never exist?" Siri challenged. Max's expression hardened. "Acceptable loss compared to the trillions who will suffer if Earth's resources continue to deplete at current rates." Lena looked beyond him to the timeline branches, noticing how they pulsed and shifted with each adjustment Max made. The scientist in her was fascinated, but the human was horrified. "There's another way," she insisted. "Instead of changing history, we adapt ourselves. Use the temporal energy as originally planned, not to maintain the Alliance's power, but to fuel a sustainable future. Too late for half measures, Max replied, making a final adjustment. The new timeline begins now. He activated the sequence, and one of the timeline branches began to glow brighter than the others. Lena could see the change propagating outward. 1945, then 1946, then onward. Events reshaping themselves like dominoes falling. In desperation, she tackled Max, disrupting his control of the console. They grappled at the edge of the bridge, reality itself warping around them. "Stop!" she shouted. "You'll fracture the timeline beyond repair." As they struggled, Kaido reached the console and worked frantically to reverse the changes. "The system's locked! I can't stop the propagation!" Mira joined him, applying her hacking expertise. "There's an override sequence, but it requires the primary operator's biometric signature." Max laughed bitterly as he pushed Lena away. "Only I can stop it now. The Council made sure of that." The timeline branch continued to brighten, the changes now reaching the 1980s. Soon, they would reach the Resource Wars, and everything after would be unrecognizable. Lena tried a different approach. "Max, think about what you're really doing. Not serving humanity, serving the Council's vision of humanity, one where they remain in control, where the power structure doesn't change." Something flickered in Max's eyes, doubt. "They chose you because they knew you'd follow orders without question," she continued. "The perfect soldier. But this isn't a battlefield with clear enemies. This is the future of every human being who will ever live." The changes reached the early 2000s now. Time was running out. "You've seen the same reports I have," Lena pressed. "Earth can be saved without this extreme measure. The Alliance just doesn't want to surrender its authority, doesn't want to implement the solutions that would require power sharing." Max looked at the advancing wave of changes, now approaching their own time. "Even if you're right, it's too late. The sequence can't be stopped without my cooperation, and the Council has safeguards in place. If I help you, they'll know." "Then we make sure they never find out," Mira interjected. "I can mask the override, make it look like system failure." For a long moment, Max stood motionless, watching history being rewritten before his eyes. Then, with a resigned sigh, he placed his palm on the console scanner. "Authorization, Reyes, Maxwell J., Lieutenant Colonel. Command override Charlie Tango 0. The console flashed red, then stabilized. The glowing timeline branch dimmed, the changes halting at 2150, decades before their own time. "Partial containment achieved," Kaido reported. "The alterations to history will remain until 2150, then snap back to the original timeline." "The Alliance will detect the failure," Max warned. "They'll send another team. Try again." Lena studied the console, an idea forming. "Not if they can't access the bridge." She turned to her team. "We can use the regulator to seal the temporal access points, make time travel significantly more difficult, if not impossible." "That would strand us here," Siri pointed out. "Outside normal time." "Not necessarily," Kaido countered. "If we calibrate correctly, we could ride the temporal reversion wave back to 2235, arriving just after our original departure." Max looked skeptical. "And what then? The Alliance will arrest us for treason." "Not if we bring proof of what they tried to do," Lena said firmly. "The regulator records all operations. We'll have evidence of their attempted historical manipulation." The decision was made. Working together, they reprogrammed the regulator to seal the temporal access points while creating an escape route for themselves. As the final sequence initiated, the bridge began to dissolve around them. "Hold on to your anchors!" Lena shouted as reality itself bent and compressed. The journey back was unlike anything they'd experienced. Not so much traveling through time as being carried by it, swept along by the current of history reasserting itself. Consciousness faded in and out, glimpses of events flashing past too quickly to comprehend. When clarity returned, they found themselves in the temporal hub, mere minutes after their original departure. Alarms blared throughout the facility as security forces converged on the platform. "Chronos team, you are ordered to surrender immediately," came the announcement. "Lay down the temporal regulator and prepare for debriefing." Max stepped forward, surprising Lena by placing himself between the team and the approaching guards. "Lieutenant Colonel Maxwell Reyes, authorization Omega 79. Stand down." The guards hesitated, conflicting protocols evident in their confusion. "We don't have much time," Kaido whispered, checking the regulator's readings. "The temporal seals are holding, but the Council will have backdoor access codes." "The evidence?" Lena asked urgently. Mira held up a small data crystal extracted from the regulator. "All here. Every order. Every intended change to the timeline." "We need to reach the public broadcast system," Lena decided. "Expose the Council's plans before they can silence us." Max nodded grimly. "I know a way. Follow me." What followed was a desperate race through the Chronos complex, evading security and fighting when necessary. Max's military credentials got them through several checkpoints before the Council locked down his access. Mira's hacking skills bypassed other obstacles. Through it all, Lena clutched the evidence that would expose the most significant conspiracy in human history. They reached the central communications hub just as Council security broke through their final barricade. As Siri and Kaido held the door, Lena and Mira worked feverishly to override the broadcast controls. 30 seconds until transmission," Mira reported. Max positioned himself at the entrance. "I'll buy you time." "Max," Lena began. "I made my choice on the bridge," he cut her off. "This is me keeping my word." The security forces breached the door. Max engaged them with both weapon and hand-to-hand combat, his military training evident in every precise movement. But there were too many, and even as the transmission began, he was overwhelmed. Across the Human Alliance territories, orbital habitats, underground cities, the few remaining surface settlements, the evidence played. The Council's plans laid bare: controlled temporal manipulation, historical revision, perpetual power through manufactured crises. In the aftermath, as Alliance security forces divided between those loyal to the exposed Council and those horrified by the revelation, Lena's team made their final stand in the communications hub. When reinforcements finally arrived, led by Alliance officers opposed to the Council's schemes, only Lena, Kaido, Mira, and Siri remained. Max had fallen defending their position, his final actions a redemption for his earlier betrayal. Weeks later, a new governing body had been established. The Temporal Regulation Authority, with Lena as its reluctant head, was tasked with establishing ethical guidelines for limited-time energy harvesting. The knowledge couldn't be unlearned, but it could be properly managed. "We lost the ability to make large-scale jumps when we sealed the bridge," Lena explained to the newly formed Citizens Oversight Committee. "But small, surgical extractions of temporal energy are still possible, enough to supplement our existing resources, while we develop truly sustainable alternatives." "And the timeline's integrity?" asked a committee member. "Secured, with monitoring systems in place to detect any attempted manipulations," Kaido answered. "The technology is now decentralized. No single authority can control it." In her private laboratory, Lena worked late into the night, reviewing temporal field projections. The damage from their adventure had mostly healed, but echoes remained, subtle alterations that would take centuries to fully integrate into the timeline. A soft knock at her door revealed Mira, carrying 2 cups of the artificial coffee that had become standard in resource-scarce 2235. "The memorials are finished," she said quietly, setting down a cup. "For Max and the others lost in what they're calling the temporal crisis." Lena nodded silently. Despite everything, she mourned Max, the soldier who had ultimately chosen the harder right over the easier wrong. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Mira asked after a moment. "Sealing the bridge, limiting our access to the past? Lena stared at the temporal projection, a beautiful, complex web of interconnected moments stretching across human history. Time isn't just a resource to be harvested, she said finally. It's the sum of all human experience, all choices, all consequences. We can borrow from it carefully, respectfully, but we can't own it. Outside, the sky over New Shanghai had changed. Still polluted, still damaged, but now tinged with sunset colors that were genuinely natural. Small progress, but progress nonetheless. In the decades that followed, the principles established by the Temporal Regulation Authority gradually transformed humanity's relationship with time and resources. Limited temporal energy harvesting supplemented traditional and developing power sources, buying civilization the years it needed to implement truly sustainable solutions. Lena never again traveled through time. The risks were too great, the temptation to change things too strong. Instead, she dedicated herself to the emerging field of temporal ethics, establishing frameworks for the responsible use of time as a resource. The human alliance eventually dissolved, replaced by more distributed governance structures better suited to a world no longer facing imminent resource collapse. The council members who had conspired to manipulate history faced justice, though some escaped into temporal pockets that would eventually collapse on themselves, a fate perhaps worse than conventional punishment. On the 10th anniversary of what had become known as the Chronos incident, Lena stood again at the observation deck where her journey had begun. The sky above New Shanghai now shone a more natural blue, the atmosphere slowly healing thanks to energy solutions that didn't require further environmental degradation. Kaido joined her, his hair now streaked with gray despite temporal preservation treatments. "The last of the aberrations has been contained," he reported. "Timeline integrity at 99.7%, the best we could hope for." "And the sealed access points?" "Holding. We detect occasional probes. Someone's still trying to break through, but the barriers are self-reinforcing." Lena nodded, satisfied. "And Project Sustainable Time?" "Progressing as scheduled. The micro-harvesters are working perfectly, collecting only naturally occurring temporal overflow without damaging the continuum. Enough energy to supplement our needs while the solar reconstruction program completes." Together, they watched as workers installed new solar collection panels on a nearby tower, technology that had existed before the temporal extraction theory, but had been deemed too expensive by the Resource Hoarding Council. "It was never about lacking solutions," Lena observed. "Just lacking the will to implement them." "Human nature," Kaido replied with a small smile. "Always looking for the quick fix, the miracle cure. And instead we got the hard path, the one that requires actual work and cooperation." A notification chimed on Lena's communication device. Mira, now heading temporal security worldwide, had sent a message. The last Council Loyalist cell had been located and neutralized. The threat of temporal manipulation was, at last, truly contained. Lena dismissed the notification and turned her attention back to the healing city. History would judge their actions, as it judged all human endeavors. They had stolen time, yes, but in the end, they had given it back. Not to the past, which needed no gift, but to the future, which had nearly been lost. In her pocket, she carried a small, ornate pocket watch, not the temporal regulator, which had been dismantled and its core components secured in separate facilities around the world, but an ordinary timepiece that had belonged to Max. Its steady ticking reminded her of the most important lesson from their journey through time. Every second was precious, not as a resource to be harvested, but as a moment to be lived. As night fell over New Shanghai, stars became visible for the first time in decades. Another small victory for a civilization learning to live within its means. Lena Oren, once a thief of time, now its guardian, allowed herself a moment of hope. The future remained unwritten, and now, it would stay that way.